You don't intimidate me, Mr. Vimmel. You incriminate yourself. The words hung in the air, slicing through the courtroom like a blade. The morning light spilled through the high windows of Manhattan Federal Court, catching the metallic glint of cameras lined up along the gallery. Every seat was filled, every breath tight with anticipation. Reporters leaned forward, pens frozen midair. They weren't there for justice. They were there for blood. At the defense table, Davis Vimmel, billionaire developer, media darling, and the man who believed he could buy fate, adjusted his cufflinks like a king preparing for a coronation. His face carried the smug calm of someone who'd built empires on other people's ruins. Hello family, if you are just joining us, hit the subscribe button and tell me me in the comment where you are watching from so that you don't miss out on the many thrilling stories we bring your way. Across the aisle sat Yana Lysistrata, alone, a Nigerian-born corporate lawyer who looked nothing like the opponents Davis was used to crushing. Her gray suit was sharp but modest, her hair pulled neatly back. Her calm was unnerving, her silence deliberate. She didn't need an army. She had the truth. Davis leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice just enough for her to hear. You'll regret crossing me, sweetheart. Yana's pen stopped. She looked up slowly, her gaze steady as if measuring him. You'll regret recording that in a federal courtroom. The silence that followed was instant and deafening. For a moment, even the gavel hesitated. Then came the frantic clicks, cameras, microphones, murmurs spreading through the room like a ripple of lightning. The judge called for order, but the moment had already escaped. Dozens of press mics had caught Davis's threat. Within minutes, it was uploaded, shared, dissected, and trending. By lunchtime, the internet had christened it with a single merciless tag. Hashtag the threat he should have made. Outside, the world was already dividing into sides. Inside, Yana didn't flinch. She closed her briefcase, expression unreadable, the faintest spark behind her calm. For her, this wasn't chaos, it was symmetry. Years ago, Davis Vimmel had destroyed her career, branded her unstable, buried her voice beneath boardroom whispers and forged signatures. And now here he was, cornered in the same place where truth could no longer be bought. The courtroom shifted as the judge delivered a reprimand to Davis, his lawyers scrambling to mitigate what had just gone viral. Davis's jaw tightened. Yana's eyes remained still on the table, tracing invisible lines between the present and the past. She could feel the weight of everything that had led to this room, the file she'd found, the reports that vanished, the moment her name disappeared from every corporate ledger. Her heart beat in steady rhythm, not with fear but recognition. The billionaire's voice echoed in her memory. His arrogance, his certainty that the world was his to own. But the tide had changed, and this time he'd picked the wrong woman to threaten. When the judge adjourned for recess, Yana gathered her documents and rose. Reporters lunged forward with questions, flashes bursting in her face. She ignored them all. Her focus was fixed on Davis, who stood pretending to check his phone, pretending not to care. Their eyes met once across the aisle. His were hard and mocking. Hers were unblinking. He tilted his chin slightly, as though daring her to falter. She didn't. Outside the courthouse, the street was chaos. Cameras, placards, murmured debates about power and pride. A journalist shouted her name. Ms. Lysistrata, are you afraid of retaliation? Yana paused, glanced toward the courthouse doors. Afraid? She said softly. No. Anticipating it? Always. The crowd erupted with questions, but she was already walking away, her steps precise, her mind replaying every detail of that morning. His smirk, his words, the sound of cameras catching the truth. She knew what was coming. Davis wouldn't back down. He'd use his wealth, his media connections, his entire empire to smear her name again. But this time, she wasn't the whistleblower no one believed. She wasn't the frightened employee signing exit papers under threat. She was the one standing in open court, armed with evidence, law, and something he could never counterfeit, integrity. The city roared outside, but inside Yana's mind, there was only quiet resolve. She had waited years for this confrontation. Years for her chance to look power in the eye and not blink. Justice, she knew, didn't always come with applause. Sometimes it started with a threat. Sometimes it began in silence. And sometimes it began with a billionaire's mistake. As she stepped into the marble corridor, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. No message. Just a file attachment. The subject line read, "For the record." Yana stopped walking. The sound of the crowd faded into the background. She opened the file, her heart slowing as rows of data filled the screen. Offshore accounts, hidden transfers, the same pattern she'd discovered years ago. Her reflection stared back from the glass surface of her phone. Calm. Composed. Ready. The past wasn't behind her anymore. It was sitting in her inbox. And this time she wouldn't be silenced. The document glowed on Yana's phone screen, each line of data cold and precise. Account numbers, shell corporations, routing codes. It was a digital confession, silent but undeniable. She stood in the courthouse corridor, the echo of reporters and cameras fading behind her. Her thumb hovered over the file name again. For the record. Whoever sent it knew what they were doing. Whoever sent it knew her. She slipped the phone into her bag and walked out into the New York chill. The streets were alive with noise. Taxi horns, voices, the city's relentless pulse. But inside her, there was only the quiet rhythm of clarity. The game had begun. That night, Yana sat alone in her apartment, lights dim, the hum of her old laptop filling the silence. The file from her phone was now open on the screen. As she scrolled, the patterns unfolded like ghosts from a grave she thought she'd already buried. Vimmel Holdings Foundation, Education Initiative, Africa. A list of transactions followed, marked with cryptic labels: literacy program, community housing, medical grant. But she recognized the routing codes. They were offshore accounts cleverly disguised. It was the same pattern she had discovered 7 years ago when she worked for Davis Vimmel. Back then, she was the youngest compliance officer on the floor, the only woman of color in a department full of expensive suits and expensive smiles. She'd worked late, poring over ledgers until her eyes blurred. That's when she noticed the first transfer. $10 million leaving a supposed school development project and reappearing weeks later in a Cayman Islands subsidiary under a different name. At first, she thought it was an error. Then she found 20 more. She'd written her report carefully, each figure sourced, each movement documented. She remembered the excitement of truth, the naive belief that honesty would matter. When she submitted the file, her manager smiled too much. "Good work, Yana," he said. "We'll handle it from here." The next morning, her keycard stopped working. By the end of that week, she was escorted out of the glass tower with her belongings in a cardboard box. 2 days later, rumors spread across the finance district, whispers of emotional instability, disciplinary issues, erratic behavior. Her reputation was dead before she could defend it. And the man behind it all? Davis Vimmel. She remembered the way he'd looked at her when she confronted him in his office. That casual arrogance that came from knowing money was louder than truth. "You're ambitious," he had said almost kindly. "But ambition without obedience is chaos. And chaos doesn't last long in my world." He was right. She hadn't lasted long. The present glowed on her laptop screen. The new data was different. Deeper, more incriminating. Someone inside the empire was feeding her the truth Davis had buried. A knock on her door broke the quiet. She froze. 3 short taps, deliberate. She glanced through the peephole. Her assistant, Nadia. "Sorry," Nadia said, stepping in, clutching a bag of takeout. "You missed dinner again. Figured I'd save you from starvation and lawsuits." Yana managed a tired smile. "I'm fine." Nadia looked at the screen. "You found something." Yana nodded slowly. "Someone sent me this. It's the same structure I discovered years ago. Only now the numbers are bigger. He's still laundering through fake charities." Nadia frowned. "That could blow the case wide open. Or get me disbarred if I can't prove where it came from," Yana said. "Anonymous evidence doesn't play well in federal court." The younger woman hesitated. "You think it's a trap?" Yana stared at the code lines scrolling across the screen. With Davis, everything is a trap. The next morning, the world saw a different kind of trap. Every major network aired Davis's smirk across their morning broadcasts. Standing before a row of microphones, he looked every bit the billionaire savior. Polished, generous, invincible. "Let's be clear," he said, his voice perfectly rehearsed. "This lawsuit is nothing more than a personal vendetta. Ms. Lysistrata is a disgruntled former employee with a record of instability. I wish her peace, but I won't let baseless attacks harm the good work we do at Vimmel Holdings." He smiled for the cameras, a benevolent king forgiving the unworthy. Yana watched the broadcast from her office, expression unreadable. The reporters laughed, the anchors debated, social media erupted. The court of public opinion was already tilting his way. Nadia swore under her breath. "He's turning the whole thing into a circus." "That's his first move," Yana murmured. "Control the narrative. Control the truth." She muted the television and opened the anonymous file again. In one corner of the ledger, a small notation blinked. A 09, Zurich. Her pulse quickened. Zurich. The same account code from years ago. Davis hadn't just repeated the fraud. He'd expanded it. She grabbed a legal pad and began tracing the money trails manually, connecting subsidiaries to charities, charities to numbered accounts. Her hand moved fast, almost feverishly. Each name she wrote was another nail in his empire's coffin. By evening she sat back exhausted, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. The city outside was slipping into its neon glow. She picked up her phone and replayed Davis's press conference. The part that made the world laugh, disgruntled former employee, made her eyes narrow. She wasn't angry. She was focused. He still thought this was about ego. About revenge. But for her, it was about every person who'd lost their savings, their homes, their faith in fairness, while men like Davis turned their suffering into luxury towers and foundation galas. She opened a fresh document and began typing her motion for additional discovery, citing irregularities in Vimmel Holdings' philanthropic activities. The judge would call it speculative. Davis's lawyers would call it desperate. She didn't care. Truth had to start somewhere. Even in a whisper. As she typed, her laptop pinged a new message. No subject line. One attachment. The sender's address was encrypted again. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a short video clip. A lavish yacht party. Men in suits laughing, champagne glasses raised. And there, in the center, Davis Vimmel. His voice crystal clear. "Money buys silence, my friends. Always has." The video cut off. Yana sat still for a long time, the screen's glow flickering against her face. Somewhere between fear and fury she smiled. "If you've ever seen power twist the truth," she whispered, "hit subscribe. This story's just beginning." The air inside Courtroom 9B was dense with anticipation. Cameras weren't allowed, but everyone knew the world was watching. Davis Vimmel sat at the defense table like a man attending his own coronation. Flawless suit, silver cufflinks glinting under the lights, a faint smile playing on his lips. Yana sat opposite him, posture straight, her expression unreadable. She looked calm, but calm was her weapon. She'd learned long ago that men like Davis mistook composure for weakness. The hearing was supposed to be procedural. A motion hearing, nothing more. But the moment Davis's lead attorney, Kenneth Marsh, rose from his seat, Yana knew something had shifted. "Your Honor," Marsh began, voice smooth as silk, "before we proceed with further discovery, the defense has concerns regarding opposing counsel's fitness to continue representation in this case." There was a murmur through the courtroom. Yana's fingers froze on her pen. She didn't move. Marsh adjusted his tie, pretending sympathy. "We have here," he said, lifting a folder, "documented evidence of Ms. Lysistrata's previous termination from Vimmel Holdings, citing erratic behavior, emotional instability, and unprofessional conduct. We also submit her prior mental health evaluations following that termination." He paused deliberately, letting the silence choke the room. "Given the nature of this evidence, we question whether she possesses the psychological stability to represent this class." Davis leaned back, watching Yana like a predator admiring his own trap. The judge frowned. "Ms. Lysistrata, do you have a response?" Yana stood slowly, her heels echoing across the marble floor. "I do, Your Honor." Her voice was even, her eyes steady. "What you're hearing is not concern for justice. It's a calculated smear. Those records were fabricated by the very corporation I'm suing. I was terminated because I discovered illegal transactions that implicated Mr. Vimmel's companies in widespread fraud. That report mysteriously disappeared. I did not." A ripple of quiet laughter spread from the gallery. Marsh objected immediately. "Conjecture, Your Honor." Yana didn't look at him. "No conjecture," she said softly. "Documentation, which will be submitted in due course, assuming no one hacks into my emails this time." The judge's gaze hardened toward Marsh. "Let's stay focused on the motion, counselor." Marsh nodded stiffly, but the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted, not about Yana's stability, but about Davis's methods. Still, when court adjourned, she could feel the shift in the air. Outside, the swarm of reporters was merciless. "Ms. Lysistrata, did you falsify your own employment record? Do you have a history of emotional breakdowns? Are you obsessed with Mr. Vimmel?" Yana kept walking, ignoring the flashbulbs. Cameras followed her to the courthouse steps, microphones thrust in her face. Her silence only fueled the frenzy. That evening, her phone buzzed with notifications. Headlines screaming across every tabloid and business outlet. "Unstable woman targets billionaire philanthropist." Ex-employee turned lawyer seeks revenge on former boss. Insider sources claim Yana Lysistrata had hallucinations before firing. It was everywhere. The calculated narrative of the broken woman chasing relevance. Nadia arrived at Yana's apartment an hour later, cheeks flushed with anger, phone in hand. "They're tearing you apart, Yana. Look at this." Yana didn't. She just poured coffee into 2 mugs and handed one over. "Don't," she said. "That's exactly what they want." Nadia threw herself onto the couch. "They're painting you like some unhinged ex with a vendetta. He's buying journalists, editors, influencers, everyone." Yana sipped her coffee, unbothered. "They think silence means surrender," she said quietly. "It means strategy." Nadia frowned. "You're really not going to respond?" Yana shook her head. "Every word I say will be twisted. Let them build their tower of lies. The higher it gets, the harder it'll fall." Nadia exhaled, pacing. "He's already won the court of public opinion." "No," Yana said. "He's winning the noise. But I'm winning the silence." The next day, Davis arrived in court with the confidence of a man who thought he'd already buried his opponent. He smiled for the cameras again, nodded to the reporters, and even stopped to sign a young fan's notepad. Inside, his lawyers moved for sanctions against Yana for unprofessional conduct, arguing that her motions were emotionally charged and factually unsubstantiated. The judge, tired of theatrics, gave a dry warning to both parties and adjourned early. But Davis's grin didn't fade. Outside, the gossip shows praised his grace under attack. A well-known talk show host even called him the picture of modern philanthropy under siege. By nightfall, the story had spread across the Atlantic. Yana worked in the dim light of her office, the city's glow reflecting off the glass walls. Her desk was littered with files, post-it notes, and a cup of tea that had long gone cold. The printer hummed quietly as she scanned through financial data pulled from the anonymous USB. Each number carried a pattern. Each pattern pointed to Zurich. She was close, dangerously close, to finding the offshore chain Davis used to move stolen money through his so-called foundations. Then her phone buzzed. A new text from an unknown number. "You're right about Zurich. Keep digging." She froze. The text vanished before she could screenshot it. Her pulse quickened. Was it a trap? Or an ally? She leaned back thinking. Someone inside the system was feeding her breadcrumbs. Someone who wanted Davis to fall. Nadia appeared at the door bleary-eyed. "You're still here." "Almost done," Yana said. "I think I found the Zurich account again. But I need confirmation." "From who?" Yana smiled faintly. "That's the question, isn't it?" The following morning, Davis held another press event. This one grander, staged in the lobby of his skyscraper. Cameras panned across marble floors and gold accents as he addressed the crowd. "This isn't about me," he said solemnly. "It's about the hard-working people who benefit from my foundation. Children in need, communities in crisis. It breaks my heart to see someone distort that for personal gain." Reporters clapped. A few cried. Davis looked upward as if searching for divine validation. Yana watched the live stream from her office, stone-faced. He was playing the role perfectly. The savior, the martyr, the misunderstood visionary. Nadia muttered from behind her, "If arrogance were oxygen, he'd never die." Yana didn't smile. Let him perform. Cameras don't protect him from evidence. She closed her laptop and turned toward her secondary monitor, a hidden system she used for secure filings. There was something she needed to do, quietly. For weeks, confidential motions and draft exhibits she hadn't shared publicly were somehow reaching the defense before she filed them. Someone inside the courthouse, a clerk or aide, was leaking to Davis's team. That was going to end tonight. She opened the next court document, a simple motion for financial discovery, and embedded a small, invisible digital watermark into the metadata of the file, a sequence of coded letters that would identify the exact device that opened or shared it. If that file leaked again, she'd know exactly who inside was selling her out. Nadia watched in confusion. "What are you doing?" Yana kept typing, leaving a fingerprint on the truth. By midnight, the office was empty except for her. The city outside was a field of lights, cold, distant, alive. She leaned back in her chair, exhaustion finally catching up. On the desk lay a newspaper headline folded neatly in half. "Unstable woman targets billionaire philanthropist." She picked it up, studied it for a long moment, then tore it into pieces. Davis Vimmel could control the story. He could buy the spotlight. But he couldn't buy the silence that came after. Silence had a way of becoming a storm. Later that night, as she finally shut down her computer, her phone buzzed again. Another message. Same unknown sender. "They're watching the filings. Be careful." Her throat tightened. She typed back before she could overthink it. "Who are you?" No response. Just the blinking cursor. Then the message disappeared entirely. She stared at the dark screen for a long time, her reflection faint against it. The calm face of a woman who knew the war was only beginning. Davis was winning in headlines, but she was winning in patience. Every lie he told became a thread she could pull. Every attempt to break her only sharpened her resolve. He thought he'd thrown the first blow. He hadn't realized yet she was still standing. And she hadn't even swung back. Outside, the city was quiet, but the skyline shimmered like 1,000 watchful eyes. Somewhere behind one of those glowing windows, someone was helping her. Someone who knew where the bodies and the bank accounts were buried. Yana locked her files, shut off the lights, and walked into the corridor. Her footsteps echoed against the marble floor, steady, precise, unhurried. She didn't need the world to believe her. Not yet. Because when truth arrived, it would roar loud enough for everyone to hear. The morning after she embedded the watermark, Yana arrived at the courthouse before the sun. The marble halls were quiet, still smelling faintly of polish and paper. Her heels echoed as she climbed the steps to Courtroom 9B. Steady, deliberate, unafraid. She had barely settled at her table when her phone buzzed. A message from the clerk's office. Davis's legal team had filed a counter-motion at 6:13 a.m., referencing sections of her unfiled document. Her stomach went still. The trap had worked. They'd accessed her sealed draft, a draft she'd never sent, never printed, never even mentioned aloud. The only way it could have reached Davis's lawyers was through the leak she'd suspected all along. Yana leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Got you," she whispered under her breath. By mid-morning, the courtroom was humming with quiet energy. The judge entered, the bailiff called order, and Davis's attorney, Kenneth Marsh, stood with the smooth confidence of a man certain of victory. "Your Honor," Marsh began, "we have reviewed the proposed motion for financial discovery that opposing counsel has circulated." Circulated? Yana interrupted sharply. That document was sealed. Filed only within this court's internal system. How did your office obtain it? Marsh hesitated. Just a flicker, but she saw it. It was mistakenly sent, perhaps? Yana's eyes narrowed. Then we can verify that. My files contain digital identifiers. If you receive that motion, you received a unique watermark. The judge glanced up from his notes. A watermark? Yes, Your Honor, Yana said, voice steady. An encrypted trace that identifies where and when my document was accessed. I'd like permission to confirm its origin. The courtroom buzzed. The clerk, a young man named Ethan Rowe, looked down at his notepad, his fingers trembling slightly. The judge studied both parties, then nodded slowly. Proceed with verification. If there's been misconduct, this court will address it. Yana turned to her laptop, connected to the courthouse system, and pulled up her internal log. A code flashed across the screen. ER 917C. She looked up at the clerk's desk. Ethan's nameplate read E. Rowe. The room went silent. Ethan swallowed hard, his face pale. I didn't. The judge raised a hand. Mr. Rowe, I think it's best you step outside for a moment. Ethan nodded shakily, gathering his papers. As he passed Yana's table, he couldn't meet her eyes. She watched him leave, then looked across the aisle. Davis's jaw flexed once, barely perceptible. The predator's mask had cracked. After the session, Yana met with the judge privately in chambers. He closed the door himself, something few judges did. You've stirred up quite a storm, Ms. Lysistrata, he said quietly. I didn't stir it, she replied. It was already there. I just pointed at the thunder. He allowed himself the hint of a smile. Mr. Rowe will be dealt with. Disciplinary measures. In the meantime, I'd advise caution. You're making powerful enemies. I didn't come here to make friends, Your Honor. Just to make truth louder. The judge nodded slowly. You have this court's attention, Ms. Lysistrata. And perhaps, its protection. It wasn't a promise, but in her world it was enough. That afternoon, the internet exploded again, this time with something darker. A video began circulating on social media. In it, Yana appeared to be sitting across from Davis in a dimly lit cafe. The camera caught her voice clearly. 20 million. Then I'll withdraw the case. The clip ended with Davis nodding solemnly, saying, That's all I wanted to hear. Within minutes, hashtags ignited. Hashtag Yana the Fraud. Hashtag Extortion Scandal. Hashtag Set Up or Sell Out. News sites ran with it instantly. The headlines were brutal. Billionaire's accuser caught demanding payoff. Leaked video exposes Yana Lysistrata as extortionist. By evening, her office phone wouldn't stop ringing. Threats. Slurs. Anonymous laughter. Nadia burst in, phone in hand, eyes wide. It's everywhere. They're calling you a criminal. It's fake, Yana said, not looking up from her laptop. Of course it's fake, but they don't care. Look, someone posted your address. Your address, Yana. Yana's head snapped up. What? Nadia turned the phone toward her. A photo of Yana's apartment building filled the screen, her floor circled in red. Underneath, let's see how brave she is in person. Yana's stomach tightened. Get that reported. I already did, Nadia said, voice trembling. The police said they'll monitor it. But they're not taking it seriously. You should stay somewhere else tonight. Yana shook her head. If I run now, he wins. This isn't a trial anymore, Yana. It's a hunt. Exactly, Yana said, eyes flashing. And I've stopped being the prey. That night, the hallway outside her apartment was eerily quiet. She checked her locks twice, then sat by the window, laptop open, scrolling through the fake video frame by frame. It was a deep fake, a convincing one. But to someone who knew the truth, the imperfections stood out. The lighting was wrong. The tone of her voice flattened where it should have lifted. AI masking. Audio splicing. Whoever had produced it wasn't just rich. They were connected. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Everyone has a price. Name yours. She stared at the words. Simple. Confident. Predictable. Davis. Her fingers hovered over the screen before typing her reply. Freedom doesn't have a price tag. The typing bubble appeared, then vanished. No answer. Yana leaned back in her chair, exhaling. Her reflection in the glass window looked like a stranger. The same eyes but sharper now. The same woman but changed by fire. The next morning, she walked into the courthouse with cameras flashing and whispers following. Reporters shouted questions. Did you take the bribe? Is the video real? Will you withdraw your case, Ms. Lysistrata? She ignored them all. Inside, Nadia was waiting with 2 coffees and dark circles under her eyes. You sure about this? She asked quietly. About walking through hell? Yana took a sip. Completely. The morning's hearing was procedural again, or supposed to be. Davis sat smugly at his table, smiling like a man who had already won. He whispered something to Marsh, and they both laughed. Yana watched them unflinching. She'd realized something about power. It wasn't measured in noise or applause, it was measured in stillness. When the judge entered, she rose. Your Honor, she began, voice level, I'd like to introduce new evidence to the record. Evidence of tampering, obstruction, and defamation orchestrated by the defendant's media affiliates. Marsh started to object, but the judge raised a hand. Let her finish. Yana handed the bailiff a USB drive. This contains metadata analysis of the so-called extortion video. It was created 3 days ago by a PR subcontractor linked to a media firm under Vimmel Holdings' umbrella. The same firm that received over $4 million in charitable grants from Mr. Vimmel's foundation last quarter. The courtroom stirred. Davis's expression shifted from amusement to irritation. She continued. The same foundation now under investigation for laundering funds meant for schools and hospitals. The judge leaned forward. You can substantiate that? Yes, Your Honor, Yana said calmly. And when I do, the question won't be whether I'm fit to represent this case. It'll be whether this court can afford to ignore it. For the first time, Davis's smile faltered. That night, after the hearing, Yana walked home under the flicker of streetlights. The air was cold, heavy with the scent of rain. She felt eyes on her, imagined or not, she couldn't tell. Halfway up the block, a man stepped from the shadows. Hoodie, mask, no expression. You're making a mistake, lady. Yana froze. Excuse me. He took a step closer. Some people don't like being embarrassed. Then he turned and disappeared into the alley. Her breath came fast, but she didn't run. She just kept walking, her pulse steadying with each step. She reached her door, locked it behind her, and leaned against the wall. Fear, she reminded herself, was a weapon, and she'd learned how to disarm it. Later, as rain lashed against her windows, she sat at her desk, drafting another motion. Outside, thunder rolled over the city like a warning. She opened the encrypted email she'd sent to herself earlier, the one containing evidence of the clerk's leak and the digital trace of the fake video's creators. Her case wasn't just legal anymore. It was war. But wars, she knew, were one revelation at a time. She typed her final line into the motion, saved it, and uploaded it under secure seal. Her watermark shimmered briefly in the document metadata, a silent signature of defiance. Davis Vimmel might control the media. He might buy loyalty and bend the system. But he could never outthink a woman who'd already lost everything and had nothing left to fear. She closed her laptop, whispered to the empty room. The courthouse hallway was quiet after the hearing, the kind of silence that feels staged, like a trap waiting to close. Yana gathered her files and turned toward the exit, her footsteps sharp against the polished marble floor. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the space. Ms. Lysistrata. The voice came from behind her. Calm, steady, unmistakably arrogant. She turned. Davis Vimmel stood near the columns, jacket unbuttoned, confidence radiating like a perfume he'd worn all his life. His security detail lingered a few paces away, pretending to scroll through phones. Mr. Vimmel, she said evenly, you're not supposed to approach opposing counsel outside of hearing. He smiled, slow and practiced. Relax. No cameras, no microphones. Just a conversation between two professionals. Yana didn't move. There's nothing professional about bribery. He chuckled softly. You always assume the worst. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. What if I told you that you could walk away from this right now? No bad press, no threats, no late-night phone calls. You're threatening me again. No, Davis said, leaning in until his cologne clouded the air. I'm offering you freedom. $20 million wired offshore, today. You disappear. New name, new life. No one would ever know. Yana's expression didn't change. Her hand, resting loosely at her side, tilted slightly. Her smartwatch screen glowing for half a second before fading back to black. I wonder, she said, her tone surgical. How many people have bought your silence this way? Davis smirked. Enough to stay rich. He stepped back, fixing his cufflinks. Think about it, Ms. Lysistrata. The world forgets fast, especially women who fight the wrong men. He left her standing there, his laughter echoing down the marble hall. Hours later she sat in her office, replaying the conversation in her head. The arrogance, the smug tone, the certainty that she'd fold like everyone else. Her smartwatch blinked on the desk, its screen displaying a recording timestamp. The secure dictation app she used for notes had been running during their exchange. Every word, every threat, captured in perfect clarity. She plugged it into her laptop, pressed play. $20 million wired offshore, today. You disappear. New name, new life. The sound of her own voice followed. Calm, sharp. You're threatening me again. Then his answer, low, smug, damning. No, I'm offering you freedom. She leaned back in her chair, heart steady. He'd written his own confession. The next morning, Davis's lawyers stood before the judge, all corporate smiles and fake civility. Your Honor, Kenneth Marsh began, we must object to the continued insinuations made by Ms. Lysistrata outside of due process. These alleged private exchanges with my client never occurred. Yana rose slowly. That's not true. Marsh turned to her, feigning confusion. You claim to have proof? Then please enlighten the court. Yana walked to the evidence table, placed a small speaker beside her laptop, and hit play. $20 million wired offshore, today. You disappear. New name, new life. The courtroom froze. The sound quality was flawless. His voice, his phrasing, his intent. It rang through the hall like a gunshot of truth. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Reporters scribbled furiously. Marsh's face drained of color. Davis sat stone still, eyes narrowing to slits. The judge's gavel slammed once. Enough. He looked at Davis. Mr. Vimmel, this court will not tolerate intimidation or misconduct. This is bordering on criminal obstruction. He turned to Yana. Ms. Lysistrata, you will submit the full recording under seal. Effective immediately, a gag order will be placed on all external communication until further notice. Yes, Your Honor, Yana said softly. Davis didn't look at her again. His lawyers whispered frantically, but it was useless. The damage was done. His own words had betrayed him. By the time Yana stepped outside, the world had already exploded. Hashtag Justice for Yana was trending across Twitter, followed closely by hashtag Power Isn't Protection. The clip, leaked by someone inside the courtroom, had gone viral. Commentators, influencers, and activists flooded the internet with her face, her name, her defiance. Davis's empire was still standing, but the foundation had cracked. Nadia called from the office, voice trembling with adrenaline. You did it, Yana. Everyone's talking about it. You just destroyed him. Yana didn't answer right away. Her eyes scanned the street. The crowd outside the courthouse had shifted. Cheers from strangers, cameras flashing, strangers shouting her name. And behind it all, a black SUV idling near the curb. Her pulse quickened. Nadia, she said quietly, stay off your phone for a while. And don't leave the office alone. Why? What's wrong? Nothing yet, Yana said. I'll call you later. She hung up and walked down the courthouse steps, feeling the eyes on her. The car didn't move. She turned the corner, pretending not to notice when it followed. Steady, slow, patient. She didn't rush. She didn't look back. Fear only gave predators power. Instead, she slipped her hand into her coat pocket, feeling the faint vibration of her smartwatch against her wrist. Still recording, still ready. Power wasn't in money or titles. It was in truth. And tonight, she'd proven that even whispers could be weapons. She disappeared into the crowd, shoulders squared, heartbeat steady. Somewhere in the distance, a reporter shouted her name. She didn't stop. She just kept walking, the faintest smile ghosting her lips. The law firm's top floor was too quiet, the kind of silence that hides guilt. Yana walked down the corridor with the NDA clutched in her hand, her heels hitting the marble like a countdown. The paper still smelled of printer ink, the signature of Martin Keene gleaming at the bottom. Her mentor. Her defender. The man who'd once told her justice doesn't bend, it breaks you before it breaks itself. Now she knew he'd bent. When she reached his glass-walled office, Martin was already standing, his expression somewhere between guilt and exhaustion. "Yana," he began softly. "You shouldn't be here." She slammed the folder down on his desk. The impact echoed like a gunshot. "You signed this." Martin's jaw tightened. "Listen." "No, you listen." Her voice cut through the room, sharp but steady. "You went behind my back. You met with Davis's lawyers. You were going to bury this case, our case, with a confidential settlement." He took off his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "You don't understand how these things work. This isn't about betrayal, it's about survival. The firm can't risk taking on someone like Davis Vimmel. The fallout." "The fallout?" Yana interrupted, stepping closer. "You mean the money? The influence? The invitations to sit beside billionaires pretending to be philanthropists?" His eyes flashed. "You think I don't care about justice? I've fought for it longer than you've been alive." "Then what happened?" she demanded. "You taught me that truth mattered more than convenience. That the law was sacred, even when it cost us everything. So tell me, Martin, when did you start selling truth by the hour?" The words hung between them like smoke. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence was confession enough. Yana took the NDA, tore it neatly in half, and dropped the pieces into his trash can. "I'm filing to withdraw from the firm," she said. "Effective immediately." Martin's expression shifted from frustration to fear. "Yana, don't do this. You can't win this case alone. You'll lose your protection. You'll be blacklisted again. You'll—" "I've already lost everything once," she said quietly. "And somehow I'm still here." He stepped forward, desperate now. "They'll destroy you." She met his gaze unflinching. "They already tried." The courtroom was buzzing the next morning when Yana entered, no longer under the banner of Keene and Lowell LLP. The nameplate at her table now read simply, "Yana Lysistrata, Counsel for Plaintiffs, Pro Bono." Whispers rippled through the gallery. Reporters leaned forward, eager for the story beneath the story. Even Davis paused mid-conversation with his attorneys, his smirk faltering for the first time. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Lysistrata, I see there's been a change in representation." "Yes, Your Honor," Yana said. "I'll be continuing this case under my own name." "And you're certain you want to proceed without firm support?" "I'm certain," she replied. "My clients deserve a lawyer who can't be bought." The judge studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. Let the record reflect the change." Yana sat down, the weight of every stare pressing on her. The reporters, the plaintiffs, even Davis himself, his expression tightening as if for the first time he'd realized she wasn't a pawn in someone else's firm, but a queen playing her own board. His lawyer, Marsh, leaned toward him. She just made herself vulnerable. Davis shook his head slightly. No. She just made herself dangerous. Later, as the courtroom emptied, Nadia caught up with Yana in the hallway. "You really did it," she said breathlessly. "You walked away from everything." Yana smiled faintly. "Everything except what matters." Nadia frowned. "And what if that's not enough?" Yana looked down at her hands, ink-stained, trembling slightly, but steady where it counted. Then I'll fail on my own terms. Outside the courthouse, the crowd waited. Cameras, microphones, strangers holding signs that read truth has no price. For a brief second, Yana closed her eyes, letting the noise wash over her. The chaos, the faith, the doubt. Every fight came with a cost, but some costs were worth paying twice. She took a deep breath, opened her eyes, and stepped forward into the flashing lights. If you've ever walked away from comfort to stand for truth, she whispered to herself, you already understand. The email arrived just after midnight. No subject line, no sender name, just a single encrypted file and a message that read, "For when the truth needs witnesses." Yana stared at the glowing screen in her dim apartment, exhaustion humming behind her eyes. She almost ignored it. She'd received plenty of anonymous tips since the trial began, most of them traps or doctored leaks planted by Davis's team to discredit her. But this one was different. It bore a security key she recognized, one used internally by Vimmel Holdings. Her pulse quickened. She opened the encryption window, entered a few lines of code, and waited as the file unfolded into two folders: board emails and private video. The video loaded first. On screen, Davis Vimmel leaned back on a white leather chair aboard a luxury yacht, champagne glass in hand. The skyline behind him shimmered. Monaco, perhaps, or Dubai. Around him sat men in tailored suits, lobbyists, lawyers, and one familiar face, a state judge currently presiding over one of his pending property cases. Davis raised his glass. "Here's to strategy," he said, grinning. "You don't win in court by being right. You win by owning the board. And gentlemen, I own every piece, from the pawns to the judges." Laughter erupted around him. Someone shouted, "Checkmate, Vimmel." And Davis leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "I don't play to checkmate," he said. "I play to make sure the other side never moves again." Yana's stomach turned. She replayed the clip 3 times, each one more nauseating than the last. Her cursor hovered over the second file, a series of internal board emails. The subject lines told their own story. Transfer to Zurich account confirmed. Media retainer renewal. Charity expense reclassification. Then, the sender's name appeared, Amara Vimmel. Attached at the bottom was a short letter. "Yana, you don't know me, but I've followed your case. I'm his sister, the one he doesn't mention. He destroyed everything he touched, including our family. I've been silent long enough. He believes he's untouchable. Prove him wrong. Finish it. Amara." Yana leaned back in her chair, breath shaky. The city outside was silent. Not even the sirens dared interrupt. For months she'd been pulling threads in the dark, never expecting someone from inside the Vimmel empire to hand her the rope that could hang it. She closed her laptop, eyes burning with new resolve. The war had just shifted. By morning, the courtroom buzzed with unusual energy. Reporters whispered, sensing something was coming. Davis sat smug as ever, dressed in an impeccable gray suit, his cufflinks catching the light like small daggers. When the judge entered, Yana stood. "Your Honor, I have a sealed motion for submission of new evidence." The judge frowned slightly. "New evidence. Ms. Lysistrata, this case is all ready. It's directly relevant to the defendant's credibility and conduct." The judge sighed, then gestured. "Proceed." Yana wheeled a small monitor toward the bench and pressed play. The courtroom filled with the sound of waves and laughter. Davis appeared on the screen, unmistakable, unmistakably drunk on his own power. "You don't win in court by being right. You win by owning the board." Every word landed like a hammer. The gallery erupted in gasps and murmurs. The reporters' pens flew. One juror covered her mouth in disbelief. Davis's face drained of color, then flushed with fury. "This is fake," he shouted, slamming his hand against the table so hard the microphone squealed. "This is a deep fake. You people will believe anything." Yana didn't flinch. "The video file is timestamped, geotagged, and authenticated through the same encryption key used by Vimmel Holdings' internal communication system. I can call a digital forensics expert to verify it." The judge raised a hand for silence. Order. Mr. Vimmel, one more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt. Davis sank back into his chair, chest heaving, glaring at Yana as if his stare could burn through her. But she only looked at him. Calm, steady, merciless. You said once that you owned every piece, she said quietly. I guess you forgot the one that could move without your permission. Davis turned away, jaw tight. His lawyers whispered furiously, scrambling to reframe the damage. But the moment was gone. Captured, immortalized. Outside, the courthouse steps would soon overflow with headlines and hashtags. Inside, silence reigned, the kind that comes when a giant realizes the ground beneath him has begun to crack. Yana gathered her papers, her voice barely above a whisper as she addressed the bench. Your Honor, the plaintiffs rest for today. The judge nodded, still stunned. As she walked out, the reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. Yana didn't speak. She didn't need to. The truth had already spoken loud enough. And somewhere far from the courthouse, in a quiet room filled with old family portraits, Amara Vimmel watched the same footage on her tablet, a faint, bittersweet smile tugging at her lips. She whispered to no one, "Checkmate, brother." And for the first time, justice began to breathe. The morning of the verdict hearing dawned gray over Manhattan, the kind of sky that promised a storm. Yana arrived early, her black suit immaculate, her eyes sharp despite the sleepless night. The courthouse plaza was already packed. Cameras, news vans, protesters holding signs that read truth over titles and no one is above the law. Inside, the courtroom buzzed like a live wire. Every journalist in the city wanted front-row access to what they were calling the trial of the century. Davis Vimmel sat at the defense table, flanked by two high-profile attorneys who looked like they hadn't slept in days either. His composure was back, but thinner now, the kind that cracks if you look at it too long. When the judge entered, the room quieted instantly. The press leaned forward. The plaintiffs, small business owners, families, victims of Davis's fraud, watched with a collective breath held tight in their chests. Proceed, the judge said. Yana rose. Her voice, calm and measured, carried through the hall like a blade drawn from its sheath. Your Honor, the plaintiffs rest on one final point: integrity. The evidence submitted across this trial has shown not only financial deception but systemic manipulation of the judicial process itself. Mr. Vimmel has. The doors at the back of the courtroom burst open. Two federal agents entered, one holding a folder, the other a warrant. The sound of footsteps echoed in perfect, terrifying rhythm. The judge's gavel struck. Order. Identify yourselves. Special Agent Herrera, Federal Bureau of Investigation, the lead agent said. We have a warrant for the arrest of Davis Vimmel on charges of wire fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The entire courtroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs, shouts from the press box. Davis's head snapped up. What is this? He demanded, rising halfway from his chair. Yana didn't move. She simply watched, her expression unreadable, as the agents approached. This is a mistake, Davis barked. You can't do this in the middle of a trial. One agent began reading him his rights. The other reached for the silver cuffs. Davis Vimmel, she said firmly, you're under arrest. Cameras flashed. Someone in the gallery screamed. The moment froze in a chaos of light and sound. Davis turned his glare toward Yana, fury burning behind his eyes. You think this ends me? He hissed as the cuffs clicked around his wrists. This isn't over. Yana tilted her head slightly, her tone cool and deliberate. It is, she said. And you're trending. The agents led him toward the exit as reporters surged forward, their microphones like spears. The sound of shutters was deafening, capturing the billionaire who once bought silence now drowned by the noise of justice. Outside the courthouse, the world exploded. Within minutes, the footage hit every major network. Davis being cuffed mid-trial. Yana standing motionless, calm as marble. Her stillness became the story, an image that would define the case. The lawyer who didn't flinch. The caption spread like wildfire. Power doesn't protect you from the truth. By afternoon, hashtags trended across continents. Hashtag Yanaless Estrada. Hashtag the fall of a Vimmel. Hashtag truth wins. In Lagos, London, and New York, her face filled screens. Commentators called her the voice of accountability. Activists called her a symbol of courage. Yana didn't read any of it. She was still in the empty courtroom hours later, gathering her files, the adrenaline fading into silence. Nadia entered quietly, eyes wide from the spectacle. "They took him straight to federal custody," she whispered. "The press is calling it poetic justice." Yana gave a small nod. "Justice isn't poetry. It's paperwork." Nadia smiled faintly. "Still, you did it." Yana looked around the courtroom, the same one where she had been mocked, doubted, outnumbered. "No," she said softly. "We did." Later that evening, Yana stepped out into the rain-soaked street. Reporters shouted her name from behind barricades, flashes reflecting off puddles like sparks. She didn't stop. The storm suited her. Cold, cleansing, honest. Across the plaza, a massive screen on a nearby building played the viral clip again. Davis's face twisted in rage, her reply slicing through the noise. "This isn't over." "It is. And you're trending." She watched it replay once more, the city's lights flickering against her reflection. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet satisfaction settled. Not victory, not revenge, but something steadier. Closure. She exhaled and whispered to herself, "Truth doesn't roar. It endures." Her phone buzzed, a new message, anonymous as ever. "There will be others. Bigger. Louder. Ready." Yana smiled faintly, slipping the phone into her coat pocket. The rain fell harder, washing away the last echoes of the courtroom chaos. "If you believe no one is above the law," she murmured, walking into the night, "keep watching. We're just getting started." Winter had settled over New York like a quiet verdict. Cold, heavy, and irreversible. The city that once pulsed with Davis Vimmel's name now moved on without it. Billboards that had carried his sleek grin and slogans about progress and philanthropy were replaced with foreclosure notices and auction signs. His empire, Vimmel Holdings, Vimmel Properties, Vimmel Foundation, had become a catalog of evidence, each asset stripped and sold to repay the victims he'd defrauded. Yana stood at her office window, watching the snow fall over the skyline. It was silent, almost poetic, the kind of peace that only comes after a storm that nearly broke you. Below, the courthouse steps that once swarmed with reporters were empty now. The frenzy had moved on to the next scandal, the next downfall. But justice, real justice, didn't trend forever. It just kept working quietly, unseen, like gravity. Behind her, Nadia entered, holding a stack of files. "The compensation transfer cleared this morning," she said, her voice gentle but proud. "The plaintiff's accounts are settled. Every single one." Yana turned, relief softening the sharp lines around her eyes. "Every one." Nadia nodded. "Even the small hardware store owners from Queens. They'll finally get their money back. It's done." Yana exhaled, a slow breath that seemed to release years of tension. Then maybe it was worth it. A week later, Yana sat in a modest auditorium, not as a lawyer this time, but as the founder of something new. The banner above the stage read, "The Lysistrata Legal Foundation. Justice without fear." Cameras flashed as she spoke, her words carrying the same calm conviction that had once silenced billionaires. "The truth," she told the crowd, "is not self-sustaining. It needs defenders, people willing to stand up even when the ground trembles beneath them. This foundation is for those defenders, whistleblowers, small business owners, those who refuse to stay quiet when they're told to." At the back of the room, Amara Vimmel sat in the shadows, head bowed. She had testified weeks earlier, her calm testimony sealing her brother's fate. No one had expected it. The sister who'd once hidden behind boardroom silence now standing in federal court, admitting her complicity and then tearing it apart from within. After the event, she approached Yana quietly. "You did what I couldn't," Amara said. "You stood in the fire and didn't burn." Yana gave a faint smile. "You helped light the way." Amara hesitated, emotion flickering in her eyes. "He ruined everything he touched. I hope this gives you something back." "It does," Yana replied. "It gives meaning to the ashes." Amara nodded once, then slipped away into the cold. Weeks passed. The world's attention shifted again, to politics, to markets, to new scandals. But Yana's world became smaller and steadier. Her new office buzzed with young energy. Law students, interns, and volunteers filled the narrow halls, their desks cluttered with coffee cups and case files. On the walls were pinned quotes. Integrity isn't loud. Courage is silent persistence. Truth doesn't need permission to exist. She moved among them quietly, reviewing documents, offering advice, occasionally smiling at the sheer stubbornness of youth. They reminded her of herself, before the trials, before the headlines, before she learned that justice was less about victory and more about endurance. That afternoon, a journalist from the New York Ledger visited. A thin, curious woman with a notepad and a nervous smile. "I know you must get tired of interviews," the journalist began, "but the world still sees you as a symbol, the woman who made the billionaire kneel. Are you proud of what you did?" Yana looked at her for a long moment, then turned toward the window where the city glowed gold beneath the setting sun. "Pride isn't the word," she said finally. "Justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it just refuses to flinch." The journalist smiled, jotting it down. "That's perfect." Yana shook her head slightly. "No. It's just the truth." As dusk deepened, the last of her interns filed out, leaving the office quiet except for the hum of the city beyond the glass. Yana poured herself a cup of tea and sat at her desk, the silence comforting now. On her monitor, a live newsfeed replayed Davis's sentencing. 25 years for fraud and conspiracy. He'd tried to look defiant when the verdict was read, but his eyes had betrayed him, the hollow stare of a man who'd finally met something he couldn't buy. Justice, she thought, wasn't revenge. It was repair. She closed the laptop, resting her hands on the desk. The nameplate in front of her read Yana Lysistrata, ESQ founder and counsel. It felt strange seeing it there not as a badge of power, but of purpose. The clock ticked softly. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, fading into the city's heartbeat. Then her phone buzzed. A single encrypted message lit up the screen. "There's another case. Another billionaire." She stared at it for a moment, the corner of her mouth curving into the faintest smile. There was always another. She stood, turned off the lights, and walked toward the window. Snow fell again, slow and silent, covering the city like forgiveness that had taken its time arriving. "If you believe truth always finds its voice," she whispered to herself, watching the lights flicker across the skyline. "Subscribe, and never stop believing." Then she picked up her coat, straightened her shoulders, and stepped once more into the world that still needed fighters like her steady, unflinching, and undefeated.